I moved to New York City with $500 in my bank account and a dream of making it in the corporate world. What I got was a haunted apartment, a nightmare job, and 3 weeks of pure terror that ended with me breaking through my bedroom wall at 2 a.m. But here's the thing about ghosts. Sometimes they're not trying to scare you. Sometimes they're just trying to tell you something. And the woman who died in my apartment? She had a message that took me weeks to understand. By the time I figured it out, I'd lost 12 pounds from stress, gotten written up at work for falling asleep in meetings, and seriously considered moving back home to Ohio. But I'm so glad I didn't. Because what I found hidden in those walls, and what happened when I finally understood what she wanted, it changed everything. This story has a happy ending, I promise. But to get there, I had to spend 3 weeks living with a ghost who wouldn't leave me alone until I helped her finish something she'd left undone 60 years ago. Let me tell you exactly what happened. I was 22 years old when I moved to New York, fresh out of college with a business degree, and exactly one job offer from a consulting firm in Midtown Manhattan. The salary sounded good until I started looking at apartment prices. I'm from a small town in Ohio, population 12,000, where you can rent a nice 2-bedroom house for $800 a month. So when I saw that studio apartments in Manhattan were going for $3,000, I nearly had a heart attack. I spent 2 weeks on Craigslist, Street Easy, every rental site I could find. Everything was either astronomically expensive or in the worst neighborhoods, or required first month, last month, security deposit, and broker's fee up front. I had $500. That was it. Then I found the listing. Studio apartment in Washington Heights. $600 a month. Available immediately. No broker's fee. I knew it was too good to be true, but I was desperate. My job started in 2 weeks. I was sleeping on my friend's couch in Queens, and she needed her apartment back. So I called the number. The landlord, let's call him Mr. Petrov, had this thick Eastern European accent. He said yes, the apartment was available. Yes, $600 was correct. Yes, I could move in immediately. All I needed was first month's rent and a $100 security deposit. I asked what the catch was. He said there was no catch. The building was old. The apartment needed some updating. But it was clean and safe, and the price was firm. I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why he was renting it so cheap. I should have done literally any research about the building or the neighborhood, or why a landlord would charge a fraction of market rate. But I was 22 and broke and desperate. So I said yes. I met him at the building 2 days later. It was a 6-story walk-up on a quiet residential street. The building looked old but maintained. Red brick, fire escape, the kind of building that's been there for 100 years. Mr. Petrov led me up to the 4th floor. The hallway was dim, smelled like old wood and something else I couldn't quite place. Not bad, just old. He unlocked apartment 4C and pushed the door open. The apartment was small. I mean, tiny. Maybe 250 square feet total. One main room that was kitchen, bedroom, and living room combined. A bathroom so small you could sit on the toilet and wash your hands in the sink at the same time. But it was clean. Empty. Hardwood floors, though they were scuffed and worn. One window facing the street. An old radiator under the window. A tiny kitchen area with a stove that looked like it was from the 1960s. Mr. Petrov said, "You like it?" I said, "Why is it so cheap?" He hesitated. Then he said, "The building, it has history. Some tenants, they say they hear noises. Old pipes, old building, you understand. Some people, they are superstitious. They do not want to stay." That should have been my second warning. But again, 22, broke, desperate. I said, "I'm not superstitious." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good. Then you will have no problems." I gave him $700 in cash. First month's rent and security deposit. He gave me 2 keys and left. I moved in that afternoon. I didn't own much. A suitcase of clothes, a sleeping bag, an air mattress, a backpack with my laptop, and a few books. That was it. That first night, I lay on my air mattress on the floor, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how I'd made it. I was in New York City. I had a job. I had an apartment. Everything was going to be fine. It was not going to be fine. My job started on a Monday. The consulting firm was everything you'd imagine. Glass office building, everyone in suits, the smell of expensive coffee and stress. I was assigned to the strategy team. My manager, let's call her Rebecca, was one of those people who seemed to think being mean was the same as being professional. She gave me impossible deadlines, criticized everything I did, made me redo projects multiple times for reasons that made no sense. My first week, I worked until 11 p.m. every night, came home exhausted, fell onto my air mattress, slept like the dead. But the second week, things started happening. The first night I noticed it, I'd gotten home around midnight. I was so tired I could barely think. I heated up some instant ramen on the stove, ate it standing up in the kitchen, then brushed my teeth and collapsed onto my air mattress. I was just drifting off when I heard it. Footsteps. Not loud. Not heavy. Just footsteps. Like someone walking slowly across a wooden floor. The sound was coming from above me, but also around me somehow. Like the sound was in the walls. I lay there, eyes open, listening. The footsteps continued for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. I told myself it was the neighbors. 4th floor. Someone lived above me on the 5th floor. Old building, thin walls. Of course I could hear footsteps. The next night, it happened again. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Starting around midnight, lasting a few minutes, then stopping. And then other things started. I'd come home from work and find my kitchen items rearranged. I'm very particular about organization. I keep my tea on the left side of the counter, sugar next to it, coffee on the right. I do this in every place I've ever lived. It's just how my brain works. But I'd come home and find them rearranged. Tea on the right, sugar in the cabinet, coffee next to the sink. Small things. Easy to dismiss as I must have moved them and forgotten. Except I knew I hadn't. The stove was another thing. I'd turn it on to make tea or heat food, then turn around to get something from the cabinet, and when I turned back, the stove would be off. The burner cold, like it had never been on at all. I started to think I was losing my mind. The stress from work was making me forgetful. I wasn't sleeping well. I was exhausted all the time. Of course I was moving things and forgetting, turning off stoves without realizing, but it kept happening. Every single day, and the footsteps got louder. By the 3rd week, I was a mess. I wasn't sleeping more than 3 or 4 hours a night. I'd lie on my air mattress, staring at the ceiling, listening to the footsteps, trying to convince myself they were normal building sounds. At work, Rebecca was getting worse. She'd started calling me into meetings just to criticize my work in front of other people. I fell asleep in one meeting and she wrote me up for it. I tried to explain I wasn't sleeping well. She said that was my problem to manage. I was losing weight. I looked terrible. Dark circles under my eyes, hands shaking from too much coffee and not enough food. One Saturday morning, I ran into my neighbor in the hallway. She lived in 4B, right next door. Older woman, maybe in her 60s, with kind eyes. She said, "Honey, you look exhausted. Are you okay?" I almost cried. Nobody had asked me that in weeks. I said, "I'm fine, just adjusting to the new job in the city." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "How's the apartment? Everything okay in there?" Something about the way she asked made me pause. I said, "It's fine." "Why?" She hesitated. Then she said, "The last tenant, she only lasted 2 months. Before that, the place was empty for almost a year. Nobody wanted to rent it after..." I felt my stomach drop. "After what?" She looked uncomfortable. "After Mrs. Kowalski died. She lived there for 40 years. Sweet woman, but she died in that apartment. Natural causes in her sleep, but some of the other tenants, they said they'd hear things afterward. Noises, things moving. That's why Mr. Petrov rents it so cheap now." I just stared at her. A woman had died in my apartment. She must have seen my face because she quickly said, "But I'm sure it's nothing. Old buildings make noise. And Mrs. Kowalski, she was a lovely person. Even if her spirit is still around, I'm sure she wouldn't want to frighten anyone." I thanked her and went back to my apartment in a daze. A woman had died here. In this room, maybe on the exact spot where I was sleeping. That night, I couldn't stay there. I called my friend in Queens, the one whose couch I'd crashed on before. I asked if I could stay the weekend. She said yes. I spent 2 nights on her couch, slept better than I had in weeks. But on Sunday night, I had to go back. I couldn't afford to rent another place. I'd already paid for this apartment. I had nowhere else to go. I came home Sunday night around 10 p.m., unlocked the door, stepped inside. The apartment was cold. Not naturally cold, Wrong cold, like walking into a refrigerator. I put my bag down, turned on all the lights, tried to make the space feel normal. I got ready for bed, brushed my teeth, changed into pajamas, lay down on my air mattress, and that's when I saw her. I thought I was dreaming at first. That moment between awake and asleep where your brain plays tricks. There was a woman sitting on the floor next to my air mattress, right next to my head. An old woman, maybe 70 or 80 years old. Gray hair pulled back, wearing an old-fashioned dress, the kind from maybe the 1950s or 60s. She was just sitting there. Looking at me, I should have screamed. I should have run, but I was frozen. Couldn't move, couldn't make a sound, and then she spoke. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. She said one word, Principessa. That was it, just that one word. Then she was gone. I sat up so fast I almost fell off the air mattress. Heart pounding, hands shaking. I turned on every light in the apartment. Checked the door, locked. Checked the window, closed and locked. Nobody could have gotten in, but she'd been there. I'd seen her. Heard her. I didn't sleep that night. I sat against the wall with all the lights on until the sun came up. I went to work the next day like a zombie. Rebecca yelled at me for a mistake on a report. I barely heard her. All I could think about was that woman. That word. Principessa. What did it mean? It sounded Italian, maybe? Princess in Italian? I didn't know. Didn't understand. That night, she came again. Same time. Around midnight. I'd fallen asleep from pure exhaustion. And then I felt something. A presence. I opened my eyes and she was there again. Sitting next to my bed. Looking at me with these sad eyes, she said the same word. Principessa. And then she was gone. This happened for 3 nights in a row. Same time, same place, same word. By the 4th night, I was losing it. I came home from work, threw my bag down, and just started crying. Full breakdown. Sitting on the floor of my apartment, sobbing, I was terrified, exhausted. I couldn't take another night of this. I couldn't keep seeing this woman, hearing that word, not understanding what she wanted. I stood up and screamed at the empty apartment. What do you want? Why won't you leave me alone? I can't move. I don't have the money. Please just leave me alone. Silence. Just the sound of my own breathing. And then, I don't know what came over me. Rage, maybe. Desperation. I started hitting the walls, pounding on them with my fists. Not hard enough to hurt myself, but hard enough to make noise. And that's when I heard it. One section of the wall in my bedroom sounded different. Hollow. I stopped. Looked at the wall. It was painted white, same as all the others. But there was a seam there, barely visible, like someone had put up a fake wall over the real one. I went to my kitchen. Found a butter knife. Came back. Started prying at the seam. The fake wall was just thin drywall, barely attached. It came away easily in pieces, and behind it was a space, maybe 2 feet deep, and in that space was a cardboard box. I pulled the box out. It wasn't heavy. I sat on my air mattress with it in my lap. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a wedding dress, not a modern one. An old one, from maybe the 1950s or early 60s. White satin, yellowed slightly with age but still beautiful. Tea-length, with lace sleeves and pearl buttons down the back. The kind of dress women wore in post-war America. Simple but elegant. Under the dress was a man's suit. Black, also old-fashioned, with a white shirt and a thin black tie. And under that, photographs. Wedding photographs. Black and white. A young woman in that exact dress, standing next to a young man in that exact suit. They were holding hands, smiling at the camera. So happy. So in love. I recognized the woman's face. It was her. Mrs. Kowalski. Young, beautiful, radiant. The groom was in a military uniform in some of the photos. Army, I think. Handsome, clean-cut. The kind of face you see in old World War II documentaries. And at the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper, were 2 wedding rings. One smaller, one larger. Gold bands, worn smooth with age. I sat there, holding these items, and I understood. This woman, Mrs. Kowalski, she'd hidden these things. Her wedding dress, her husband's suit, their photographs, their rings. She'd hidden them in the wall and died before she could. What? Before she could do something with them? But why hide them? Why not keep them out, displayed, honored? I looked at the photographs more closely. On the back of one, in faded ink, it said, Margaret and Joseph Kowalski, June 18, 1952, Princessa Wedding Chapel. Principessa, not an Italian word for princess. It was the name of the wedding chapel. Principessa Wedding Chapel. She'd been saying the name of where she got married. The name of the place that mattered most to her. But why? What did she want me to do with this information? I stayed up all night, looking through the photos, holding the dress, trying to understand. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I didn't care if Rebecca fired me. I needed to figure this out. I went to the public library, the big one on Fifth Avenue. I asked the librarian to help me find information about residents in my building, specifically Mrs. Margaret Kowalski, apartment 4C. The librarian helped me search through old city records, obituaries, property records. It took hours, but we found it. Margaret Kowalski, born 1931, died 2019, age 88. Survived by no immediate family. Buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. No immediate family. That meant her husband was already dead. I went through more records. Found Joseph Kowalski's death record. Died in 1969. War injuries, the record said. He'd been buried at Woodlawn Cemetery too. But here's what I realized. They weren't buried together. Joseph was in one section of the cemetery. Margaret was in another, over 100 yards away. Different plots, purchased at different times. She'd lived 43 years after he died. 43 years alone. And when she died, she wasn't buried next to him. I looked at those wedding photos again. The way they looked at each other. The pure joy on their faces. And I understood what she wanted. I called the cemetery. Asked if it was possible to visit the graves. They said yes, visiting hours until 5 p.m. I packed the box carefully. The wedding dress, the suit, the photos, the rings. All of it. Took the subway to the Bronx, then a bus to the cemetery. Woodlawn Cemetery is massive, over 400 acres. It took me almost an hour to find Joseph's grave. Simple headstone. Joseph Kowalski, 1930-1969, beloved husband, U.S. Army veteran. Then I walked to Margaret's grave, across the cemetery, in a newer section. Her headstone. Margaret Kowalski, 1931-2019, rest in peace. I sat down between the two graves, right on the grass, opened the box. I laid out the wedding dress carefully on Margaret's grave, the suit on Joseph's, put the photos between them, the rings on top of the photos, and I said, out loud, I'm sorry you weren't buried together. I'm sorry you waited so long, but I brought your wedding things. I brought the memory of your day. I hope this helps. I felt silly talking to graves, but I didn't know what else to do. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes, just sitting. The sun was starting to set, casting this golden light across the cemetery. And then I saw them. I know how this sounds. I know you might think I was hallucinating from lack of sleep or stress, but I saw them. Margaret and Joseph, young again, like in their wedding photos, standing together between the graves. Margaret was wearing the wedding dress. Joseph was in his suit. They were holding hands, and they were surrounded by this light. Not harsh, not blinding. Soft, warm, like sunlight through clouds. They looked at me. Margaret smiled. Not sad anymore, not desperate, just grateful. She mouthed 2 words. Thank you. And then they were gone. The light faded. The cemetery was just a cemetery again. But the wedding dress and suit were gone too. The photos, the rings. The box was empty. I sat there for a long time, just breathing. Not scared, not confused, just peaceful. I took the empty box and walked back to the subway. Rode home as the sun set over the city. When I got back to my apartment, I knew before I even opened the door. I could feel it. The apartment was warm. Normal warm. The air felt different. Lighter, I went inside. Put the empty box in the trash. made myself tea on the stove, which stayed on the entire time. My things in the kitchen were exactly where I'd left them. That night, I slept. Really slept. 10 hours straight. No footsteps, no noises, no visits from Margaret. She was gone. Finally at peace. That was 3 years ago. I still live in that apartment. Rent still $600 a month. Mr. Petrov never raised it. My job got better after that. I started sleeping, my performance improved, and eventually Rebecca got transferred to another team. I got a new manager who actually treats people like humans. But more than that, something in me changed after I helped Margaret. I stopped being so afraid all the time, stopped feeling like I was barely surviving. I started actually living. I never saw Margaret again, never heard the footsteps or found my things rearranged. The apartment is just an apartment now. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I can smell something. Not bad. Something like old perfume and soap. The smell of someone who was loved. And I like to think that somewhere, Margaret and Joseph are together. Really together. Finally at peace, dancing in their wedding clothes, the way they should have been all along. Here's what I learned from living with a ghost. Sometimes the dead aren't trying to scare you. Sometimes they're just trying to finish something. Trying to be remembered, trying to have one last thing made right. Margaret could have made my life unbearable, could have terrified me until I fled the apartment. But she didn't. She just wanted help. Wanted someone to understand. Wanted her love story to have its proper ending. And I'm so glad I was the person who could give her that. If you ever move into a place that feels wrong, that has history you can't explain, don't run immediately. Listen. Pay attention. Because maybe there's a story there that needs to be finished. Maybe there's someone who just needs to be heard. Thanks for listening to mine.